Yeah, today we are going to discuss about chapter unit 5, that is cultural traits, ethos and cultural process, diffusion, acculturation, enculturation and assimilation. So first we'll discuss about the objectives. Objectives of the unit is cultural traits and ethos. How various cultural processes such as diffusion, acculturation, enculturation and assimilation take place. So introduction of the unit is: in the previous unit, we discussed the concept, meaning, elements, and various definitions of culture along with analyzing the characteristics of culture. Furthering our discussion on the topic of culture, we will see about the cultural traits and ethos that we experience in the given culture of any society. So this is like basic introduction about the cultural traits. Cultural traits means a trait or attribute many eliminate that nature of any object. Trait of a culture or those distinguished features such as norms, folkways, mores, laws, and belief systems that exist in the given culture. కల్చరల్ ట్రేట్స్ అంటే ఏంటంటే ఆ కల్చర్ యొక్క అంటే వాల్యూస్ అంటే ఫోక్ వాళ్ళకి సంబంధించిన ఫోక్ కల్చర్. ఇప్పుడు ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ ట్రైబల్స్ కి కొన్ని రకాలైన ఫోక్ డాన్స్, ఫోక్ డ్రెస్ అట్లాంటివి ఉంటాయి. వాటిని కల్చరల్ ట్రేట్స్ అంటారు. So what next is norms. A norm is a rule or standard set by a society that guides and governs individuals' behaviors with other members in society. Next, folkway. Folkway, a term coined by William Graham Summer, it means the ways of folk with special emphasis on traditional customs even in modern society. An example of folkway custom is the modern practice of Hindu marriages. So, for example, ఫోక్ వేస్ లో ఒక ఎగ్జాంపుల్ ఏం చెప్పొచ్చు అంటే ఇండియన్ కల్చర్ లో మ్యారేజ్ సిస్టమ్ ఒక ఫోక్ వే లాగా చెప్పొచ్చు. అంటే పర్టికులర్ ప్రాక్టీస్ లో భాగంగా అవి మ్యారేజ్ అనేది చేస్తారు. అన్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్, మ్యారేజ్ కెన్ బి ట్యాపరింగ్ ఆఫ్ మోడర్న్ డీడ్స్ సచ్ యాజ్ డీజే ప్లేయింగ్ మ్యూజిక్ ఆర్ ఫోటోగ్రఫీ డిస్కమ్. The marriage is officiated by the priest. The groom and bride enter the marriage bond while the by representing the gods bears witness. The traditional ceremony remains unchanged by the introduction of modern practice. This is a way we can be called as folk way. సో ఈవెన్ లైక్ మోడర్న్ డేస్ లో అంటే మోడర్నిటీలో వెళ్తున్నా కూడా స్టిల్ అంటే ఇండియన్ హిందూ కల్చర్ లో మ్యారేజ్ అనేది సేమ్ ప్రాక్టీస్ చేస్తున్నారు. దట్ ఈస్ కైండ్ ఆఫ్ ఫోక్ వే. వాట్ ఆర్ ద మోడ్స్? నెక్స్ట్ విల్ డిస్కస్ అబౌట్ మోడ్స్. మోడ్స్ ఈజ్ అ లాటిన్ టర్మ్ దట్ మీన్స్ మోరల్స్. మోడ్స్ అంటే ఏంటంటే మోరల్స్. Any society requires the members to have some moral governing how they conduct themselves with others in society. Modes often act as a special agency in guiding the members of the society to do things that are accepted and approved as right behavior. Those who behave contrary to established morals are often called immoral beings. సో అంటే ఒక సొసైటీలో కొన్ని మోరల్ వాల్యూస్ ఉంటాయి. అంటే మోరల్ వాల్యూస్ ని కాకుండా వేరే అంటే మనం అందరము ఒక కైండ్ ఆఫ్ డ్రెస్ కానీ ఒక కైండ్ ఆఫ్ ఫుడ్ తింటుంటాము. బట్ కొంతమంది మేము లేదు ఇట్లాంటిదే ఎందుకు తినాలి, మేము వేరే రకమైన ఫుడ్ తింటాము అని చెప్పేసి అంటుంటారు. వాళ్ళని ఇమ్మోరల్ కూడా కన్సిడర్ చేస్తారు అనమాట. పర్టికులర్ సొసైటీ వాళ్ళ సొసైటీలోని విషయాలను కాకుండా వేరే విషయాలు వాళ్ళు ప్రాక్టీస్ చేస్తూ ఉంటే వాళ్ళు ఇమ్మోరల్ పర్సన్స్ కన్సిడర్ అవుతారు. Laws are next is laws. Laws are more formalized and perspective norms that will be reward and punish the individuals for their behavior. Generally, laws are created and enforced by the state. However, there are some social laws that are accepted and followed by societies other than the state. సో జనరల్ గా లాస్ అనేటి స్టేట్ అంటే గవర్నమెంట్ డిసైడ్ చేస్తుంది. బట్ గవర్నమెంటే కాకుండా అంటే సొసైటీలో కూడా కొన్ని పర్టికులర్ లాస్ ఉంటాయి. అవి ప్రతి ఒక్కరు ఫాలో కావాలని వాళ్ళ సొసైటీ యొక్క నార్మ్స్ లో భాగంగా ఉంటాయి. నెక్స్ట్ ఈజ్ బిలీఫ్ సిస్టమ్. Belief system, a community or society can be defined as a group of people who share a common belief systems and live in a geographical territory. In other words, the members of any community will share common belief and utilize their beliefs to enforce societal expectations and enforce acceptable behaviors. సో అంటే పర్టికులర్ సొసైటీ ఒక గ్రూప్ ఆఫ్ పీపుల్, ఒక గ్రూప్ ఆఫ్ కమ్యూనిటీ, ఒక పర్టికులర్ జియోగ్రఫికల్ లొకేషన్లో ఉన్న వాళ్ళు సేమ్ బిలీఫ్ సిస్టమ్ ఫాలో అవుతారు అన్నమాట. అంటే ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ తెలంగాణలో ఉన్న అందరూ బతుకమ్మ సెలబ్రేట్ చేసుకోవడం, బోనాలు సెలబ్రేట్ చేసుకోవడం, అక్కడ పర్టికులర్ ఆ రీజన్, ఆ టౌన్ కానీ ఆ విలేజ్ లో ఏవైతే సిస్టమ్స్ ఉంటాయో అవి ఫాలో అవుతారు కాబట్టి అది బిలీఫ్ సిస్టమ్స్ అని అంటారు. నెక్స్ట్ ఈజ్ 5.3 ఎథోస్ ఆఫ్ కల్చర్. The ethos of culture is generally understood generally understood as the ethics that are supposed to be believed and taken into consideration in day-to-day conducting of oneself in the society. Ethos also refer to the affective or emotional quality of a culture exposed in a series of beliefs, thoughts, and behavior. It acts as the central driving force and influences nearly every material item of culture. As it determines what people should have, think, and feel, the cultural ethos encourages the people in a society to express similar emotion tones in their acts, thoughts, and feelings. A cultural ethos will take variety of human emotions and thoughts, good and bad, calm and angry, compassionate and exploitative norms, and abnormal honesty and dishonesty. The ethos of cultural demands us to behave appropriately as per the demands of the situation. We often come across words such as researcher ethics, various ethics, ethical conduct, teaching ethics, and so on. In this context, ethos can be roughly translated to dharma. Please note that dharma can also be interpreted as religion, but for the conceptual understanding, we will use dharma as ethos of culture, a duty to be carried out by some professions in the manner that it is expected of them by society. We appreciate a sincere, corruption free, and honest bureaucratic in the current society. We often forget that these are supposed to be characterized of a bureaucrat. Instead, we have made peace with the nations that the bureaucracy is not sincere, corrupt, and not honest to their duties. That is why we praise and appreciate a bureaucratic who is not corrupt. So, this is ethos of culture. Ethos of is generally understood ethics. అంటే ఎథిక్స్ లో భాగంగా హౌ ఎథిక్స్ షుడ్ బి కన్సిడర్ అనేది ఇక్కడ ఉంటుంది. నెక్స్ట్ ఇస్ 5.4 కల్చరల్ ప్రాసెసెస్. కల్చరల్ culture may be understood as a design for living and is subjected to change as per the needs of the people living in a particular space and time. అంటే ఒక పర్టికులర్ ప్లేస్ లో పర్టికులర్ పీపుల్ అంటే పర్టికులర్ కమ్యూనిటీ వాళ్ళు ఒక విధమైన సిస్టమ్ ని ఫాలో అవుతే అది కల్చరల్ అంటారు. Human society creates a change creates and changes culture, and culture will change human behavior in society. అంటే ఈ కల్చర్ అనేది హ్యూమన్ బీయింగ్స్ క్రియేట్ చేసిన ఒక సిస్టమ్. అంటే మనుషులు వాళ్ళకు వాళ్ళు క్రియేట్ చేసుకున్న ఒక సిస్టమ్ ని కల్చర్ లాగా భావిస్తారు. అంటే ఇది ఎప్పుడు కూడా చేంజ్ అవుతా ఉంటదని ఇక్కడ చెప్తున్నారు. If not the culture process, adaptation and change of the culture, humans would not have been living in diverse environment conditions. From mountains to riverbanks to desert to jungles, each environment demands a particular way of life, and humans choose the best to negotiate it with the environment that they live. The మనుషులు తనకు తాను సృష్టించుకున్న కల్చర్స్ లో వాళ్ళు ఎక్కడైనా అడాప్ట్ కాగలుగుతారు. అంటే కొంతమంది మౌంటైన్స్ లో ఉంటారు, కొంతమంది నది తీరాన ఉంటారు, కొంతమంది డెజర్ట్స్ లో ఉంటారు, కొంతమంది అడవుల్లో ఉంటారు. డిఫరెంట్ డిఫరెంట్ పీపుల్ డిఫరెంట్ డిఫరెంట్ కల్చర్స్ లో భాగంగా వాళ్ళు అక్కడక్కడ ఉంటారని ఇక్కడ చెప్తున్నారు. నెక్స్ట్ ఈజ్ 5.4.1 డిఫ్యూషన్. డిఫ్యూషన్ ఇస్ సోర్స్ ఆఫ్ చేంజ్ వెన్ ఎవర్ న్యూ కల్చరల్ elements are adapted from another society and merged into the receiving society. The process by which cultural elements are borrowed from another society and incorporated it into the culture of recipient groups is called diffusion. డిఫ్యూజన్ అంటే ఇట్స్ కైండ్ ఆఫ్ చేంజ్, అంటే కల్చర్లో మార్పులు వస్తున్నప్పుడు వాటిని డిఫ్యూజన్ అంటారు. సో ద ప్రాసెస్ ఆఫ్ డిఫ్యూజన్ టేక్ ప్లేస్ ఇన్ త్రీ బేసిక్ ప్యాటర్న్స్: డైరెక్ట్ కాంటాక్ట్, intermediate contact, and stimulus diffusion. Direct contact elements of society's culture may first be taken up by neighboring societies and they gradually spread after a field. As stated in the earlier example of yoga and Hinduism, the direct contact between the two cultures facilitated the cultural flow. Such cultural exchange generally goes both ways. The Indians in other countries may adopt to some of the cultural aspects of their respective cultures which they have interacting, and the other cultures who adopt some of the cultural aspects of India. Next is intermediate contact. Diffusion by intermediate contact happens through a third party agency. Take the example of merchants in pre-British area. They brought several religious practices to state of Kerala that was adopted by some of the people that state and remain part of culture to this day. On the other hand, European merchants took spices and tea from Indian subcontinent, and that consumption of that soon became a part of culture of the Europeans. Even those who have never been to India in globalized world economy, we can buy the products that are manufactured somewhere else through the intermediate agency called the market. Stimulus diffusion. Knowledge of a trade belong to another culture stimulus the intervention or development of local equivalent cultural forms. However, this is innovation within the culture. The motivation and the content came from outside, and the form is changed to suit to local culture. Such an example of stimulus diffusion is the social reform movement that took place during the British regime in India. The Western educated Indian lawyer who had been trained in England began questioning and working to change aspects of Indian society. They found abhorrent and attempted to direct Indian society on a more progressive path. Next is 5.4.2 acculturation. The process of change called acculturation seems to include more include much of what we have discussed under label of diffusion, because acculturation refers to the changes that occur when different cultural groups come into intensive contact. Acculturation is similar to diffusion as both of them are the process that defines cultural change when a culture is exposed to other culture. However, anthropologists use acculturation to denote the process of extensive cultural borrowing in the context of subordinate and superordinate and subordinate relations between societies. In the later British regime, most of the British portrayed themselves as superiors to Indian subjects and their culture. Another example of the acculturation process is that the immigrants to other countries who tries to adopt the culture of the country they are in and adopt the majority culture and blend it. అకల్చరేషన్ అంటే ఏంటంటే, ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్ ఒక మైగ్రెంట్ ఇప్పుడు ఇండియన్స్ వెళ్ళి అమెరికాలో ఉంటారు. వాళ్ళు అక్కడ కల్చర్, అక్కడ ఫుడ్ హ్యాబిట్స్, అక్కడ డ్రెస్ హ్యాబిట్స్, అక్కడ స్లీపింగ్ ప్యాటర్న్ అవన్నీ కూడా అక్కడి సొసైటీలో వాటిని అడాప్ట్ చేసుకోవడం దాన్ని అకల్చరేషన్ అంటారు. నెక్స్ట్ ఈజ్ అసిమిలేషన్. అసిమిలేషన్ ఈజ్ ఎ ప్రాసెస్ దట్ ఈస్ సిమిలర్ టు అకల్చరేషన్. But anthropologists to describe the process by which individuals acquire social roles and culture of dominant groups, a term more often used acculturation. It is important to know that it is not merely peripheral cultural traits that are adopted by migrants to blend in the host country, but adopting the cultural traits. అసిమిలేషన్ అంటే అక్కడ లోకల్ కల్చర్ ని మొత్తం అంటే కలిసిపోవడం అంట, వాళ్ళ కల్చర్ లో కంప్లీట్ గా కలిసిపోవడం. Next is enculturation. The process of enculturation is often used as synonymous with socialization, which means the process of cultural transmission that happens between the members of same culture. A child learning the cultural traits of his or her own culture from its parents and society is termed as enculturation. అంటే వాళ్ళ సొసైటీలో ఉన్న కల్చర్ని వాళ్ళ పేరెంట్స్ ద్వారా అంటే మన పేరెంట్స్ ద్వారా మనం నేర్చుకుంటాం అంటే అక్కడ ఎన్కల్చరేషన్ అంటాం. The recent studies prove that the tools are being used by the greater apes. For example, in orangutan in Indonesia, to hunt and dig out the ants from the ant hills. The younger origins follow their mother, imitate them, learn how to use twings and tools to gather and eat the food. అంటే పేరెంట్స్ మన ఫోర్ ఫాదర్స్ కానీ పేరెంట్స్ కానీ వాళ్ళ నుంచి నేర్చుకోవడం అనేది ఇన్కల్చరేషన్. So, summary of this unit is the unit discuss cultural traits to understand the concept of culture better. Understanding the folkways, modes, social laws, traditions, belief systems are key to understand the cultural norms. Norms make a very important idealistic aspects of cultural traits. The materialistic aspect that happens as to understand the culture is often referred to its items. Uh, So this unit also dealt with the cultural ethos, the guides the humans of various status roles to behave the manner that is expected of them ideally. The people who conduct themselves as per the ethics are socially rewarded. The cultural process of diffusion, acculturation, assimilation, and enculturation was also discussed to show how the culture from one another take place. So next unit is theories of culture. So we will complete this unit also, theories of culture. So this is very important. For example, objectives of this unit is to understand various theories of culture in anthropology. Explain various cultural phenomena with the help of theories discussed in the chapter. Introduction. In the previous unit, we discussed traits, ethos of culture, and the various cultural processes that occur in most of societies. In this unit, we will see different theories put forward by socio-cultural anthropologists. These theories aid us to understand the cultural phenomena which we experience in day-to-day life. In other words, these theories provide us answers for why we dress, where to do, why we forge our marriage alliances different from other cultures, why we organized our family in particular manner, why we celebrate festivals at a particular time of the year, and so on. Theories of culture. SF Nadal defines theories as a body of interconnection, interconnected propositions concerned with a particular problem, era, and meant to account for the empirical facts in it. Theory can also be understood in another less ambitious sense, namely as the body of propositions which are to map out the problem era area and thus prepare ground for its empirical investigation by appropriate method. The first theory is evaluationism. The theory propagates the every society and it is social institutions such as family, kinship, marriage, religion, law owning passes from one stage to another, mostly from simple society to the complex one. The belief in this evolution of societies and their culture is key to its evolutionism school of thought. When the European colonists started exploration and trade with societies across the globe, they have come across various cultures. And the scholars were attempting to explain why the difference exists between the cultures in the world. The early scholars of anthropology wanted to explain why different societies have different forms of organizing marriage, family, and religion. In the 1700s, Adam Fregos, John Miller, and Adam Smith reflected that all societies pass through four stages, namely hunting and gathering, pastoralism and nomadism, agriculture and commerce. These are the different stages explained by the scholar. Each society have different stages. Next is different scholars explain about the theories of evolutionism, and the main concept is by Herbert Spencer in the early 19th century come up with the phrase survival of the fittest, in which he emphasized in demonstrating the process of social selection, which will favor the individuals with merit in the given society. హెర్బర్ట్ స్పెన్సర్ ఏమన్నాడంటే సర్వైవల్ ఇస్ ద ఫిట్టెస్ట్. అంటే ఎవరైతే అంటే స్ట్రాంగ్ అంటే ఎవరైతే సొసైటీలో సర్వైవ్ అవ్వగలుగుతారు వాళ్ళే సొసైటీలో ఫిట్ అంటే నెగ్గగలుగుతారని ఇక్కడ మెయిన్ ఉద్దేశం. And next is diffusionism. The scholars affiliated with this school of thought were mainly concerned to address why different societies are similar or different stages of development. Some are hunting and gathering, while other societies have complex economic production system which has nothing to do with the environment or nature. The proponents of this school of thought also maintain that the societal change occurs because the societies choose to adopt the cultural traits from one another, like acculturation. In other words, diffusionism is interested to understand the distribution of culture, the origin of cultural traits, and their spread from one society to another. This theory also strongly believes that cultural traits have originated in a limited number of cultural centers and spread to other areas from these cultural centers. The American diffusionist school was founded by Franz Boas and followed by Clark Wissler. Albert K. Horber follows the thread of German diffusion school. The culture also approach in imperative to understand the diffusion of consultants, traits, and complexes. Frank Boas had also taken into account of psychic unit as postulated by the evolutionist school and blended in with historical aspects that played a role in shaping the culture. This had led formulation of historical particularism. So, after discussing about the diffusionism, next we will discuss about historical particularism. Historical particularism formulated by Franz Boas as a criticism to the unilineal evolutionism that believes that all societies pass through similar kind of evolutionary stages and didn't give much importance to the historical factors that can shape the culture. Historical particularism maintains that each society has its particular historical development. This view also led to the development of the idea of cultural relativism against ethnocentrism. In this theoretical approach, Bose sought to reconstruct the histories of specific cultures. He emphasized the meticulous collection and organization of ethnographic data on all aspects of many different human societies. Only after information on the particulars of many different cultures had been gathered could generalization about cultural development be made with expectations of accuracy. His students Alfred and Ruth, Robert, Paul, and Edward Speyer were the followers of his approach. This theoretical approach also received criticism for emphasizing on the past rather than present to understand the culture. Next is functionalism. As the earlier discussed, theoretical approaches mainly concern through themselves with the history or how the cultures were and society was. The current theoretical approach, functionalism, mainly attempts to understand the culture in the present. What role a cultural trait plays in the system. The credit for propagating this theoretical approach was given to British anthropologists Radcliffe Brown Malinowski Ra- and Malinowski. Radcliffe Brown is created with structural functionalism. We will deal with this in the coming section in this unit. And Malinowski deals with bioculture and psychological functionalism. They have also emphasized on carrying out the studies of the culture by living with people in their natural habitats. Prolonged stay among the people, understanding their culture from one point of view, learning their language and culture rather than carrying out speculative methods. Functionalists also draw parallel with the organic analogy to describe different parts of society and their relationship. The organic analogy gives us an idea of how all the cells, tissues, and organs all depend on each other and interconnected to make the body function and survive. Similarly, functionalists advocated that every cultural traits and institutions exist in correlation with each other. In the survey purpose, every institutions will have a functions to deliver and contribute to the whole system. Malinowski suggested that individuals in a society will have psychological needs, such as reproduction, food and shelter, and the social institutions. Malinowski suggested that individuals in society will have psychological needs, such as reproduction, food, shelter, and social institutions like marriage, family, and culture, exist in fulfilling these those needs. Apart from the psychological needs, physiological needs, there are cultural derived instrumental needs such as economic, social control, education, and political organizations. These requires institutional organizations and system in place. Each institutions have the personal character, a set of norms and rules, activities, material apparatus, and serves the functions in the society. Malinowski also argued that physiological responses are the results of psychological responses are the results of physiological needs. To sum up, Malinowski argued that each institution or cultural trait exists in society fulfill the needs, physiological and cultural, of the individuals in the society. Ralph Ignon placed this emphasis on the structure in total rather than the individual needs. Next is 6.6.2 structural functionalism. Radcliffe Brown emphasized on social structure rather than in biological needs. He suggested that the society is a system of relationships maintaining itself while institutions are orderly set up relationships whose function it is to maintain the society as a system. Radcliffe makes an important distinction between individual and person. An individual is a biological organ that carries out different physiological and psychological functions until it exists. A person, on the other hand, is a human being in a complex set of social relations. A person is a unit of study for social anthropologists. He also uses the term social personality for the position a human being occupies in a social structure. Society's environmental and values control the relationship between persons. As culture is a part of society, he also argues that social structure and organism are prone to change, yet they are stable and ensure continuity. The social structure continues over time, and he calls it a dynamic continuity. Next is structuralism. This theoretical approach is affiliated with one of the stalwarts of anthropology called Levi-Strauss. He is famous for contributing to understand the social structures in a indigenous cultural ingenious cross-culture analysis of myth and kinships and coming up with advocacy that we psychologically meant to see things in binary opposition. He also heavily draw his influence from the linguistic science and tried to apply in the to understand the social structure in the social system. He emphasized on the instance taboo that is universally absorbed. He changed the way the anthropology studies the kinship systems because before his intervention, kinship studies were dominated by understanding the distance and the reasons why we organize ourselves and lineage, clan, and caste structures. Next is culture and personality. Some of the post structuralists emphasize the individuals and their social roles and their choices, which paved the way for understanding the relationships between cultures and how it shapes to personality in the individual in a society. In the first half of 20th century, more and more scholars have subscribed to the idea that adult behavior is culturally patterned. Childhood plays an important role in influencing the personality in a adult, and adult personality characteristics are reflected in the cultural beliefs and social institutions such as religion, family, kinships, and vice versa. Next is Marxism. Marxism is a theoretical approach developed after Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels' doctorate. Marx and Engels are revolutionaries who focus their efforts on understanding capitalism to overthrow it. Capitalism means that by the ability to own capital, the owner or ruling class demands that profit should be given to them. Marx questions this by asking what are the historical circumstances that paved way for capitalists coming from own capital but other than. The philosophers have only interpreted the word in various ways. The point, however, change it. Hence, Marx and Engels proposed to abolish private property and to establish a new political order of socialism, which will lead to stateless communism. For finding evidence for their hypothesis and argument, Marx and Engels heavily depended on the anthropologist's works of that. Next is feminism. With the Marxian understanding of the society, as well as the women right movements that have originated in the US and Europe of that time, and influenced anthropologists to complement their discipline and make the woman represented either in the ethnography or in the academic discipline itself. The anthropologists who incline to focus on the women's role in society and to give credit for the achievements and contributions for the survival of the society, which was not studied in prominence. It came to know as a feminist anthropology. It started with questioning the androcentric narratives that had come up with the earlier anthropological literature. And the focus of the study centered on men was criticized heavily, and focus was shifted to xenocentric, making it gender equal or neutral. The scholars like Ruth Bennett, Margaret Mead, Elon Lillock, Sherry Arthur, and Gail Rubin contributed heavily in establishing feminism as a school of thought. Now, more and more students, not only female students, but the students of anthropology in general, and being gender sensitive in writing their ethnographies as well as representing women equally with men in the society as well as taking care not to undermine the contribution of women of the society. Some scholars are going to extent of not using mankind. Ego as male while explaining the kinship pattern as making it more gender neutral. Next is Postmodernism. Postmodernism is a phase which mainly originated in the West as a movement of consciousness and reflexivity of human understanding of the social condition. This is also fluid by the economic systems changed from feudalism to the industrialism. This is also the age where the religion got spread from state and its opposition and the members of the society believing in the believing in themselves. Postmodern centric of anthropology is that the anthropologists try to narrate and write the ethnographies based on their own experience and their own culture life. Anthropologists, when they provide their interpretations, it might be blocked by issues of power and wealth in their own culture, which postmodernism tries to defy. Postmodernism does not recognize any object, truth, or fact. They are more interested to know the subjective nature of it. They would prefer not to analyze the data from anthropologist's point of view. Rather, want the anthropologist to give an overall view of culture and leave the choice to audience of derive their conclusion. And summing up this chapter, in this chapter we discuss the theories of evolutionism, diffusion, functionalism, structuralism, historical particularism, culture, and personality. School, Marxism, feminism, and postmodernism. These theories are not supposed to be seen in chronological order. These theories only help us to understand the cultural phenomena better and is no way should be considered as the only way of understanding the cultures. The concept of culture is highly subjective in manner and should be viewed from different angles to be a better understanding. So in this unit we have some model examination questions. For example, we may get these questions in the exam. One is briefly write on the theories of culture, so we can explain all these theories in that question file. Postmodernism, modernism, evolutionism, feminism, Marxism, and all. Uh, and we also get question on feminism. Discuss the feminism. So in this question, we can write what is feminism. Feminism ante ఏంటి? So feminism is nothing but those who support equality, means equal rights and like gender neutrality. Gender neutrality means all genders should have equal opportunities, equal rights, equal uh, things in every aspects of the life. So we also all in the question in this section we discussed about who are the feminists who talked about feminism and all. So today we discussed two units, that is fifth and sixth. So next class will be on block 2 social institutions. So in this unit we have in this block we have three units, that is unit 7 marriage definitions, characteristics and typology. Unit 8 is family definition, characteristics and typology. And unit 9 is kinship, structure, types and usages. So today we will close the session and next class will be on block 3, that is in 3 units. Okay, we'll close this class.